Thank you for tuning in. Tonight's upload is a 2-for-1 holiday offering, pulled from the pages of creepy cryptid tales, stories meant to be heard late, in the quiet, when the world feels just a little too still. If you want to own these stories for yourself, the link is waiting below. Before we begin, if you haven't already, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. It's the only way this channel survives, and the only way you'll know when the next nightmare arrives. You'll also find links to Obsidian Quill merchandise in the comments. This channel has passed 160 subscribers and is still growing, and every one of you chose to step into the dark with me. You didn't click by accident. You stayed. Your likes, your comments, your shares, they keep these stories alive. They tell the algorithm there's a place for horror that doesn't blink and doesn't apologize. So if you're new here, welcome. And if you've been here since the beginning, thank you for walking this road with me. There are more stories coming, darker ones that don't let go once you hear them. So turn the lights down, check the locks, and listen carefully, because once these stories begin, there's no pulling over. And remember to watch for my upcoming supernatural thriller, Blood in Brooklyn, arriving January 2026, a story that rewrites the rules of vampires and werewolves, and what it means to survive them. Now enjoy the stories. Over 2 a.m., Crenshaw Boulevard, Los Angeles. The street lay silent beneath the orange glow of aging streetlights, empty and watchful. Storefronts were dark. Windows were blind. Even the air felt still, heavy, as if the neighborhood had learned not to breathe after midnight. A 14-foot U-Haul box truck rolled down Crenshaw at a steady crawl, its engine humming low, tires whispering against the asphalt. Reggie Johnson sat upright behind the wheel, both hands locked at 10 and 2, eyes flicking between the road and the traffic light ahead. Red. The truck came to a smooth, obedient stop. Nothing moved. No cars. No pedestrians. No sound but the ticking of the engine and the distant hum of the city far away. Then, whoop! The sudden bark of a police siren ripped through the quiet like a gunshot. Red and blue lights exploded across the mirrors, painting the empty street in violent color. Reggie's heart slammed into his ribs. "Great," he whispered. He glanced into the rearview mirror and felt the dread harden into certainty. "Mallard?" Reggie hissed under his breath, keeping both hands firmly on the wheel. Officer Dirk Mallard, 20-year veteran of the LAPD. Still on patrol, not because he was good at his job, but because the department never quite knew what to do with men like him. Mallard was a problem they shoved onto night shifts in neighborhoods they didn't care about. He had built his career on his shortcomings, his bitterness, his cruelty, his need to dominate, and he took it out on the community he was supposed to serve. Everyone knew it. No one said it out loud. Mallard hated black people, not quietly, not subtly. He wore it like armor. These were his streets, and he treated them like occupied territory, determined to keep what he called the colored disease in line. Complaints followed him like shadows. Internal reviews, paid suspensions, nothing ever stuck. Reggie eased the truck to the curb and killed the engine, the sudden silence ringing in his ears. His pulse pounded so loud he was sure Mallard could hear it. His father's voice surfaced unbidden, calm and tired. "Do everything right. Say nothing wrong. Don't give him a reason. Make it home alive." The patrol car door opened behind him with a slow, deliberate creak. Footsteps followed, unhurried, certain. Each one landed heavy on the pavement, announcing authority, ownership. A flashlight beam speared through the driver's window, blinding him. "License and registration," Mallard snapped. Reggie swallowed hard. Officer, may I ask what I did? Mallard leaned in, invading the space, his shadow swallowing the window. His breath carried coffee, old cigarettes, and something sour underneath. His hand drifted toward his gun, not urgently, not defensively, but the way a man rests his hand on something he enjoys using. Don't question me, boy. The words slid out slow and deliberate. I said license and registration. Now. Reggie nodded, movements careful, controlled. It's in my visor, sir. May I reach for it? Mallard paused. For a flicker of a second, a memory surfaced. Blood on concrete, a child's scream cut short, a cell phone skittering across an alley floor. Forms, interviews, a paid suspension, a minor inconvenience. Mallard clicked his tongue. 2 fingers, he muttered. Other hand stays on the wheel. Reggie moved like a man disarming a bomb. 2 fingers raised, slow reach, no sudden motions. He pulled down the visor, retrieved the paperwork, and held it out with open palms. Mallard snatched it from his hand, then stepped back, the flashlight roaming the cab like a searching eye. Slow, invasive, deliberate. It lingered on the dashboard, the seats, Reggie's hands, as if cataloging him piece by piece. What you hauling, Reggie? The way he said his name wasn't casual. It was possessive, like he'd decided it belonged to him. Reggie swallowed. Helping my aunt move, he said carefully. She bought a new house up in the northwest part of California. Just taking her antique sofa and a china hutch. Trying to beat traffic. I've got about a 2.5-hour drive ahead of me. The word antique made Mallard's eyes narrow. Not with suspicion, with offense. Something ugly flickered behind his stare. A quiet, simmering resentment. Antique. Value. History. Something worth preserving. Mallard hated that. People like this weren't supposed to have anything old, anything cherished, anything passed down. In his mind, value was reserved for people who looked like him. Everyone else was temporary, replaceable, disposable. Mallard leaned in again, nostrils flaring, flashlight beam climbing Reggie's face like it was searching for permission. I smell alcohol. Reggie's heart stuttered. He didn't move, didn't blink. I haven't been drinking, sir. Mallard smiled. It wasn't friendly. It wasn't even amused. It was the smile of a man who had already decided how the night would end. One of them was going home to the shabby, dark apartment where he drank bourbon in his uniform reading propaganda about white supremacy. The other was going to county lockup. Well, Mallard said softly, almost pleasantly, I think you have. His hand drifted down, resting near his gun. Not to draw it, not yet, but to remind Reggie it was there. A suggestion, a threat, a promise. Step out of the vehicle. The night pressed closer, thick and airless. A car slowed across the intersection, then sped up, disappearing into the darkness. No one wanted to see. No one ever did. But officer, out! Now! Mallard's voice cracked like a whip, loud enough to echo off the storefronts and windows. Residents hid behind curtains and ducked back into the shadows. You people, he muttered, not bothering to lower his voice. Always drunk, always high, always lying. Reggie opened the door. The truck rocked slightly as his weight shifted. Somewhere deep in the back of the truck, something heavy slid and settled, Mallard noticed. He turned his gaze from the truck to watching Reggie, watching his posture, his hands, the way his shoulders tightened. He waited for a mistake. He always got one. My aunt's expecting me by morning. Reggie said. Mallard laughed, a short, humorless sound that echoed too loudly in the empty street. Well, she might be disappointed. He leaned in close, breath hot and sour, the flashlight glaring like an accusation pressed into Reggie's chest. County jail tonight, truck impounded, and whatever you're hauling. His mouth curled. I always find something. Reggie's jaw clenched. His voice came out low, barely more than breath. Racist pig. The street went dead silent. Mallard's face hardened instantly, whatever mask he wore snapping clean off. What did you say? He barked. Reggie straightened despite himself, fear and anger colliding in his chest. You heard me. The punch came without warning. Bone cracked against bone. Reggie hit the pavement hard, stars bursting across his vision as the breath left his lungs in a sharp, helpless gasp. Mallard stood over him, chest heaving, eyes bright with something close to joy. Out here, he snarled. I am the law. He grabbed Reggie by the collar and hauled him upright. That's when it happened. The truck shifted. Not much, just enough. A low creak rolled through the cargo hold, followed by a dull thump, heavy weight settling where it hadn't been before. Mallard froze. His head tilted slowly toward the truck. What was that? He said, voice suddenly quiet. Reggie's eyes flared. Mallard turned back to him, suspicion sharpening into certainty. Furniture doesn't move like that, he said. So what you got in there, Reggie? Reggie stepped forward instinctively, putting himself between Mallard and the truck. It's my aunt's things, he said quickly. You don't need to go back there. That was a mistake. Mallard's face twisted, not with suspicion now, but with rage. The audacity of it. A black man telling him no, standing in his way. Mallard swung again, harder this time, knocking Reggie sideways. He grabbed him, wrenching his arms behind his back, metal cuffs snapping shut with vicious finality on one wrist. You don't tell me what I need, Mallard hissed. You don't block me. You don't exist unless I allow it. As he jerked Reggie upright, something else cut through the night. A voice. Soft. Female. Help me? Mallard froze. The words drifted out of the truck, weak, frightened, unmistakably human. Mallard's brow furrowed. He leaned closer, heart beginning to pound. What the hell is that? He muttered. Reggie said nothing. He just stared at Mallard. Mallard swallowed, unease crawling up his spine. He followed Reggie's gaze toward the rear of the truck and smiled, forcing his confidence back into place. Oh, he said softly. That what you're worried about? He dragged Reggie with him, boots scraping, and reached for the latch. Don't! Reggie rasped. Too late. The tailgate dropped. Darkness spilled out. Then a sound rolled forward, low, slow, alive. Not a growl meant to scare. A growl meant to claim. It vibrated through the asphalt, through Mallard's bones. The flashlight trembled as he raised it. Brown fur. Too much fur. A massive shape crouched in the darkness, swallowing the light instead of reflecting it. Eyes flared gold, intelligent, feral, aware. Mallard's mouth opened. What the? A massive hand exploded from the darkness and clamped around his head. Reggie pushed himself up from the pavement, jaw aching, lungs burning. He wiped blood from his lip and looked up. Mallard hung in the air. His boots kicked uselessly, scraping at nothing, legs pumping in blind panic as his brain struggled to catch up with what his eyes were seeing. One moment, he'd been in control. Badge, gun, night shift authority. And the next, gravity had abandoned him. The hand around his head wasn't human. It was enormous. Fingers thick as clubs, the grip crushing. Not tight enough to kill, not yet, but firm enough to promise it could. The arm it belonged to was corded with muscle, wrapped in dense reddish-brown fur that disappeared into the darkness of the truck like a living wall. Mallard gagged, hands clawing at the wrist, holding him aloft. What the? His voice came out thin, strangled. Reggie didn't rush. He moved calmly, deliberately, as if the night had suddenly slowed to his pace. He reached behind him, fingers slipping into his back pocket, and withdrew a small key. Click. The cuffs fell open. Metal hit asphalt with a soft, final sound. Mallard's eyes locked onto Reggie. Wide, bloodshot, pleading now. The power dynamic had inverted so completely, it left him naked. Reggie stepped closer. As he reached Mallard, he removed the pistol from the officer's holster, with practiced ease, checked the chamber, and slipped it away. Then he reached up and calmly switched off the radio. The sudden silence was crushing. No backup, no witnesses, no way out. Mallard wheezed, eyes darting between Reggie and the massive arm holding him suspended. Reggie looked up at him, expression flat, empty. "Mallard," he said evenly, "meet Luke." The grip tightened just enough to steal Mallard's breath. Then, from somewhere in the truck, came a voice, soft, female, frightened. "Help me!" Mallard froze. His eyes flicked upward, confusion warring with terror. The voice came again. "Please, help me?" It wasn't right. The cadence was off, too perfect, too rehearsed. Understanding slammed into him like ice water. "No," Mallard rasped. Reggie watched him closely, head tilting slightly. Luke let out a low, rumbling sound, almost a chuckle, then repeated the voice again, mimicking it flawlessly. Mallard's stomach dropped. He'd been baited. The thing holding him wasn't just strong, it was smart. The massive shape shifted forward, and Luke finally stepped fully into the streetlight. Mallard's breath hitched, 10 feet tall. At least 1,000 pounds of dense muscle and fur, shoulders wider than a doorway, chest rising and falling with controlled, patient breaths. His face was unmistakable now. Simian, brutal, ancient, eyes glowing gold with an intelligence that stripped away any remaining denial. This wasn't a man. This wasn't an animal. This was something older. Something that had learned how predators hunted and adapted. Mallard's body went slack. A broken sound escaped his throat. "Oh my God," he whispered. Reggie leaned in, voice low and cold. "You thought you owned these streets," he said. "You thought the badge made you untouchable." Luke's fingers flexed slightly. "You were wrong." Reggie stepped closer, his voice steady, too steady. "A few months ago," he said, "you shot a kid." Mallard's eyes twitched. 13 years old, Reggie continued. "You said you were in danger?" He leaned in just enough that Mallard could hear every word. "That kid was my brother, Michael." Mallard's breath hitched. "He liked anime," Reggie went on calmly. "Collected sneakers. Stayed up late playing NBA 2K on his PlayStation. He was top of his class. Teachers said he was going places." Reggie's jaw tightened. "And you gunned him down in an alley because he was holding a phone." Luke's grip tightened, just a fraction. Mallard screamed, not loud, not long. A broken animal sound ripped from his throat as his body folded inward, pain detonating through his spine. His feet kicked wildly, useless. "Luke," Reggie said softly. The pressure eased. Mallard hung there sobbing, gasping, eyes streaming. Reggie continued, tone flat again, almost conversational. "Our parents raised us to see the world," he said. "Different places, different people." He glanced up at Luke. "One summer, we were visiting my aunt up north. Michael and I found him in the woods, hurt, scared, just a kid himself." Luke let out a low growl, the sound vibrating through the street. "We fed him, protected him, made him family." Mallard's eyes darted to Luke, horror deepening as understanding finally set in. He loved Michael, Reggie said quietly. Luke growled again, this time deeper, angrier. So if you think I'm angry, Reggie continued, try to imagine how Luke feels. Reggie lifted his fingers and gave a sharp whistle. Doors opened. People stepped out onto stoops. From alleyways, from darkened buildings. Faces filled the street. Silent, watching, unafraid. Witnesses. They stared in stunned disbelief at the impossible sight. A police officer suspended in the grip of something that should not exist. Reggie turned to them. Tonight, he said, voice carrying, Mallard won't be bothering us again. No cheers, just nods, understanding. Reggie gestured toward the patrol car. Burn it. Leave it under a bridge. Make it look like he wandered off. The men moved immediately. Mallard thrashed weakly. You won't get away with this, he screamed, voice cracking. You hear me? You won't... Reggie looked up at him one last time. His eyes were dry, cold. Luke, do it, he said simply. Luke turned. The cargo door slammed open. Mallard's scream erupted as he was dragged backward into the darkness of the truck, high, raw, pleading. The door slammed shut. The engine roared to life. As Reggie pulled away, Luke's growl rolled through the cargo hold, deep, final. Mallard's scream cut off. The street fell silent again. 3 months later, park rangers hiking a restricted stretch of forest in Northern California found a torn LAPD uniform snagged in the underbrush. At first, they thought it belonged to a missing hiker. Some idiot who'd wandered too far off trail. Then they found what was left of the man. The body lay scattered across a shallow ravine, half covered by leaves and rain-soaked earth. What remained of Officer Dirk Mallard was barely recognizable. His torso was twisted at an impossible angle. Bones shattered inward, as if crushed by something that hadn't needed claws to break him. The official report was short. Cause of death: unknown animal attack. Time of death: undetermined. Additional details: inconclusive. But the Rangers saw more than what the report allowed. They saw the footprints. Each one sank deep into the soil, 18 inches long, pressed nearly 3 inches into packed earth. Not a bear, not a cat, not anything listed in the manuals they'd memorized. The prints circled the body, not frantically, not randomly, deliberately. The corpse itself told a quieter, uglier story. The tongue was gone, torn out at the root. Both eyes were missing, the sockets dark and ruined. No defensive wounds, no sign of a chase. It looked less like an attack and more like an execution. One ranger vomited. Another crossed himself. A third radioed it in with a shaking voice and stopped talking altogether. When biologists requested tissue samples, the request stalled. When questions were asked about the footprints, the photos disappeared. When one ranger used the word non-human, he was quietly reassigned. The file was sealed within a week. Officially, Officer Dirk Mallard died alone in the wilderness. Unofficially, a family finally received something the system had denied them. Justice, no apology came with it. No acknowledgement. No folded flag or carefully worded statement. Just the absence of a name that would never again be spoken in fear. And a community lost its persecutor. With Mallard gone, the complaints he left behind, once buried, dismissed, lost, resurfaced, Internal Affairs was forced to look where it had refused to before. Reports were reopened. Body cam footage was reviewed. Patterns emerged that could no longer be ignored. Stops without cause. Arrests without evidence. Confessions coerced through fear and pain. One by one, cases unraveled. Men walked out of holding cells blinking into daylight they hadn't seen in years. Women were released from charges that should never have existed. Families were reunited, slowly, cautiously, scarred but free. There was no press conference announcing accountability. No public reckoning. Just quiet corrections made in file rooms and court orders stamped without comment. Officer Dirk Mallard had died alone in the wilderness. His absence repaired more lives than his badge ever had. And though the system would never admit it, the streets were safer. Not because a cop had once patrolled them, but because he never would again. They say street justice is reckless justice, that it solves nothing. But in the case of Officer Mallard, it was justice delayed far too long. If you're still here, if you've made it this far into the dark, remember to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. Not just to help the channel grow, but so you know when the next story finds you. Because what comes next is worse. What comes next doesn't wear a badge. It doesn't ask questions, and it doesn't make mistakes. Now, brace yourselves. This is the second story. Serial killer.
Dr. Jarrett Bryce finished up his shift at Our Lady of Mercy Hospital in Cleveland. It was almost 1 o'clock in the morning. He said his goodbyes to the overnight staff, gave a few tired smiles, and made his way to his BMW 750 waiting in the parking lot. Looks like a quiet night after all, he thought to himself, feeling a rare sense of peace. He pulled out of the lot, turned onto the main road, and headed home through the empty streets. Inside his 2-story suburban house, everything was as he had left it, clean, orderly, untouched. He parked in the garage, entered through the side door and went upstairs to change, but not into pajamas. Instead, he pulled on a pair of old painter's overalls he kept folded in a shed out back. Thick work boots followed, then rubber booties slipped neatly over them. Finally, he pulled on a fresh pair of surgical gloves, snapping them tight at the wrists. Satisfied, Dr. Bryce walked back to the garage, slid into his car, and drove off into the night. He drove for 30 minutes, the city lights thinning behind him, until he reached a stretch of isolated storage yards. Pulling into the lot, he rolled down his window and punched in a code at the security gate. The gate clattered open without hesitation. Bryce drove through casually, weaving through rows of metal doors until he reached Unit 736. Without even a glance around, he parked in front of it, climbed out, and entered the massive unit with a practiced, nonchalant ease. Inside the storage unit, under a single hanging light, stood an operating table. Strapped to it was a young woman, no more than 22 years old. She was wide-eyed, trembling, her wrists and ankles bound tightly with leather restraints. Her mind raced, desperately trying to piece together how she had ended up here. Last night felt like a dream. She remembered sitting at a bar, celebrating a new job and a fresh start in Cleveland. A charming man had approached her, confident, polished, claiming he was a doctor. He offered to buy her a drink, congratulating her new chapter in life. She remembered smiling. She remembered laughing. She remembered thinking how lucky she was to meet someone so kind. Now, she was staring up at the same man, his face calm, almost warm, as if nothing had changed. "Well, my dear," Dr. Jarrett Bryce said smoothly, adjusting the surgical light above her. "How are we feeling today?" His voice was soft, almost musical, like a doctor checking on a routine patient. He placed a gloved hand lightly on the gag covering her mouth, feeling her shallow, panicked breaths. "Now, a reminder," he continued gently, tapping the gag twice with 2 fingers. "If you scream, no one will hear you. We're quite far from civilization tonight." He leaned in closer, his eyes gleaming with a cold, clinical excitement. "And," he whispered, his smile tightening, "I detest loud noises. If you force me to listen to them—" He paused, savoring her terror. "I may have to remove your tongue." The woman whimpered beneath the gag, tears spilling down her cheeks. Dr. Bryce smiled wider, savoring the moment, before turning to his instruments laid out neatly beside the table. Scalpels, bone saws, syringes gleaming under the harsh light. "Let's begin, shall we?" he said. He removed the gag carefully, almost tenderly, like a doctor adjusting a patient's mask. The young woman gasped for breath, coughing through tears. Why are you doing this?" she choked out. Dr. Jarrett Bryce smiled warmly, as if she had asked him a perfectly reasonable question. "Well, my dear," he said, adjusting his gloves, "you see, I am an artist." "Most artists," he continued, strolling to a nearby tray of gleaming instruments, "use paint or clay to create their visions." He selected a syringe, tapping it lightly with one gloved finger. "I," he said, smiling wider, "prefer to shape my masterpieces from blood and human bodies." The woman whimpered, pulling against the restraints weakly. "Why me?" she whispered. Dr. Bryce turned, syringe glinting under the overhead light. "Because you, my dear," he said, voice thick with admiration, you embody the fleeting joy of material success. A life newly built, bright with ambition, and tragically unaware of how easily it can be taken. He tilted his head thoughtfully. "You will become another masterpiece, a testament to the impermanence of mortal achievement." He turned back to the tray, selecting a second vial. "Another masterpiece?" she asked, voice trembling. "How many have you made?" Dr. Bryce chuckled, soft and cold. "You," he said, preparing the injection, "will be lucky number 8. Her eyes widened in terror. So, you're the Michelangelo killer," she gasped. "You're the one who mutilates women and fills their bodies with cement." Tears streamed down her cheeks now, the final pieces clicking together. Dr. Bryce turned back to her, bowing slightly, almost mockingly. "Guilty as charged," he said with a theatrical flourish. He approached, holding the syringe up to the light with clinical precision. "Now, this will make you very sleepy," he whispered. But before he could plunge the syringe into her arm, she moved. In one violent, fluid motion, she snapped the leather restraint on her wrist and seized Dr. Jarrett Bryce by the throat. Her fingers squeezed hard enough to make him gasp, the syringe falling from his hand and clattering to the floor. She wrenched herself free of the remaining straps, all without letting go of his neck, and sat up on the operating table, dragging him closer. Leaning in, her breath hot against his ear, she whispered, "I've been looking for you." Then she threw him. Bryce smashed into the metal wall with a heavy thud, crumpling to the ground in shock. He scrambled backward, blinking in disbelief. She stood over him, small, petite even, and yet she had hurled him across the room like a child tossing a toy. "How?" Bryce stammered. She cracked her neck, the sickening pop echoing through the unit. A slow smile spread across her face. "Took me a while to figure out your little pattern," she said, voice low and gleeful. "Another 2 weeks hitting every bar in Cleveland, pretending to be the perfect victim." She flexed her fingers, the joints popping like gunshots. "Well," she said with a grin, "all I can say is thanks for making the hunt challenging." She stepped closer, eyes flashing. "You better run now." Bryce didn't wait for a second invitation. He bolted toward the unit door, tearing it open and sprinting into the cold night. But she was right behind him, silent, fast. She grabbed him by the collar just as he cleared the threshold, yanking him back with terrifying strength. He looked up in horror. Above them, the full moon shone bright and merciless. "Can't have you driving off," she said sweetly, and then hurled him toward the dark edge of the woods like he weighed nothing at all. Dr. Bryce staggered to his feet, coughing, terrified. "What are you?" he rasped. She smiled wider now, and her pupils slit into something inhuman. Her hands began to shift, bones snapping, fingers stretching into gnarled, deadly claws. Fur erupted along her arms, her frame growing larger, more monstrous with each passing heartbeat. Her voice was deeper now, layered with something not entirely human. "I'm death, doctor," she growled. Dr. Jarrett Bryce's eyes bulged in horror. Standing before him, towering 6.5 feet tall under the full moon, was a female werewolf. A thick, dark fur matted with saliva and blood. Jaws lined with glistening razor-sharp fangs. Clawed hands flexed eagerly at her sides. Jarrett turned and bolted toward his car in blind panic. But she was faster. She darted in front of him with terrifying ease, wagging a clawed finger back and forth in a mocking, no-no gesture. Terror surged through Jarrett's veins. The same terror he'd once relished causing in others. He spun and sprinted into the woods, crashing through branches, stumbling over roots. Behind him, he heard her howls, long, low, predatory, echoing through the trees. His foot caught on a root and he went sprawling, dirt filling his mouth, hands clawing at the ground. Desperate, he spotted a large, hollowed-out log nearby and scrambled inside, curling into the damp, rotting wood. He pressed himself into the darkness, holding his breath, heart pounding so loud he feared it would give him away. Outside, he heard her footfalls, heavy, deliberate, circling. Short, guttural growls. The sharp panting of her breath. He squeezed his eyes shut as her claws scraped against the bark. Then, after a tense eternity, he heard her footfalls retreat, deeper into the woods. "Now!" Jarrett burst from the log and ran, every muscle screaming, stumbling through the trees back toward the parking lot. He spotted his car, still gleaming under the overhead light. Gasping, sobbing, he flung open the door and collapsed into the seat, fumbling with the ignition. He slammed his thumb onto the start button. Crash! A hairy, clawed hand shattered the driver's side window in an explosion of glass. Before he could even scream, she yanked him out of the car with inhuman strength, dragging him across the asphalt. "I told you," she snarled, her voice a guttural growl. "No driving away for you." Before he could beg, before he could plead, she sank her massive jaws into his throat, ripping out a thick, steaming chunk of flesh. Blood sprayed across the lot. She spat the mangled flesh onto the ground with disgust. Then, with a low, satisfied growl, she began to feast. The next morning, a black BMW 750i tore down the highway, leaving Cleveland in the rearview mirror. Behind the wheel sat a young woman, no more than 22 years old. Her hands were steady on the wheel, her eyes calm, almost bored. She flipped on the radio casually, tuning into the morning news. "Breaking news this hour." The anchor's voice crackled through the speakers. Authorities have confirmed a major breakthrough in the Michelangelo murders. Dr. Jarrett Bryce, the suspected serial killer, was found dead outside a Cleveland storage yard late last night. Investigators also uncovered DNA evidence, clothing, and partial remains linked to 7 of his victims. The young woman smiled faintly. She reached forward and clicked the radio off. The highway stretched endlessly ahead, She shifted her grip on the wheel and pressed the accelerator a little harder, the BMW surging faster toward the horizon. Plenty to feed on there, she thought, her lips curling slightly at the corners as the New York State border signs came into view. Thanks for watching. If this story kept you looking over your shoulder, there's more waiting for you in creepy cryptid tales. The link is in the comments below. Be sure to check out my other books, including The Hunt for Dogmen, for encounters that don't end just because daylight comes back. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next upload. Every bit of support helps this channel grow. And as the woods go quiet, the snow falls, and most people feel safe inside. Remember, that's when they move. Merry Christmas, and may you survive the new year. I'll see you in the next nightmare.